Historical and etymological origin of Bael. The name Bael, also spelled Baal, Baal, Beel, or Baal, has Semitic roots dating back to the earliest written records of Mesopotamian and Canaanite civilization. In Semitic languages, especially Akkadian, Ugaritic, and Ancient Hebrew, the term Baal simply means lord, owner, or master. It was an honorific title frequently used to refer to local deities who presided over a city, a geographic region, or an aspect of nature. For this reason, Baal did not refer to a specific deity, but rather an epithet that accompanied multiple names: Baal Hadad, storm god; Baal Zebub, lord of the flies; Baal Hammon, North African deity, among others. During the Iron Age, and particularly in the region of Canaan, Baal Hadad was one of the principal deities of the Ugaritic pantheon. He was a god of thunder, rain, and agricultural fertility, widely worshipped in temples and sanctuaries in cities such as Ugarit, Tyre, and Sidon. His cult included ritual sacrifices, ecstatic dances, and processions, similar to the rituals carried out in honor of other Near Eastern deities. Over time, however, the rise of Israelite monotheism and the religious reforms promoted by kings such as Josiah, according to the Old Testament, promoted a systematic demonization of these rival cults. The Hebrew Bible, in texts such as Kings, Judges, and Jeremiah, denounces the worship of Baal as idolatry, making it synonymous with apostasy and moral corruption. The transition from Baal as a venerated deity to a demon was a slow process fraught with theological and political connotations. During the Hellenistic and Roman periods, the name Baal was no longer understood as a generic title, but as the proper name of a false and evil deity. This change was consolidated with the translation of Hebrew texts into Greek in the Septuagint, where Baal-zebub was transformed into Beelzebul, which later became Beelzebub, one of the most prominent infernal figures of medieval Christianity. Despite this phonetic evolution, Baal and Beelzebub were treated as separate entities in Renaissance grimoires, although they often had similar symbolic functions, associated with pride, lies, and temptation. In the Ars Goetia, the most influential grimoire in Western tradition, Baal appears as the first demon in the catalogue, indicating his precedence and power within the infernal hierarchy. This position is not accidental. It reflects a historical legacy in which Baal, as the supreme entity of ancient polytheistic pantheons, was absorbed and demoted in the Christian worldview as the first great spiritual threat. This transformation can also be seen in Johann Weyer's Pseudomonarchia Daemonum, where Baal is described as a powerful king ruling over 66 legions of spirits, perhaps alluding to the vastness of his former influence as a Semitic god. Baal and Renaissance demonology. During the European Renaissance, a period characterized by the rediscovery of ancient knowledge and the rise of esoteric thought, the figure of Baal took on a concrete form within the grimoires that laid the foundations of Western occultism. Renaissance demonology not only compiled tales of demons for inquisitorial or theological purposes, but also structured veritable infernal hierarchies inspired by both angelic models and feudal conceptions. In this context, Baal emerged as a demon of the highest dignity, the first to be invoked and described in the influential grimoire Ars Goetia, the first section of the Lemegeton Clavicula Salomonis. In the Ars Goetia, Baal is described as a powerful king of hell who commands 66 legions of spirits. The choice of this number is not arbitrary. Roman legions contained between 4,000 and 6,000 soldiers, implying that Baal would have authority over hundreds of thousands of entities. Furthermore, he is said to have 3 heads, one of a toad, one of a human, and one of a cat. This particular iconography has been subject to multiple interpretations. The toad symbolizes the occult, the poisonous, and transmutation, as in alchemy. The human head represents the intellect, and the cat evokes the nocturnal, independence, and the arcane. Together, these forms suggest an entity capable of manipulating both the physical and spiritual, the rational and the instinctive. One of the main powers attributed to Baal in Renaissance grimoires is that of granting invisibility. This power, highly coveted by magicians and sorcerers, had connotations that went beyond simple physical concealment. It implied the ability to evade the sight of enemies, religious authorities, or hostile spirits. In a symbolic sense, it also alludes to the idea of transcending the ego, becoming invisible to the world in order to achieve a state of inner enlightenment. In addition to this gift, Baal is described as a master in the art of influencing human perceptions, manipulating thought, and altering the will, making him an ally equally feared and revered. Johann Weyer, a 16th century physician and demonologist, mentions Bael in his Pseudomonarchia Daemonum, a work that purported to expose the superstitions of witchcraft but, paradoxically, became a key source for later grimoires. Weyer notes that Bael has the power to make men invisible, and that he teaches secret arts and sciences. Although his tone is skeptical, his detailed cataloging of infernal spirits, inspired by earlier texts such as the Liber Officiorum Spirituum, ultimately established a nomenclature and hierarchy that would be adopted and adapted by later occult literature. In this work, Bael also occupies the first place among the 69 demons listed, reinforcing his position as the inaugural and dominant figure within hell. Iconography, symbols, and seals of Bael. The visual representation of Bael in esoteric and occult tradition has been one of the most fascinating aspects of his study, due to the symbolic richness and iconographic ambiguity surrounding him. Unlike other demonic entities whose image has been standardized to religious or folk art, Bael retains an eminently esoteric iconography, dominated by cryptic elements and hybrid representations. From his appearance in Renaissance grimoires to his modern reinterpretation by contemporary occultists, Bael has been depicted as a figure composed of multiple heads, each of which holds hidden meanings that can be traced to both alchemical symbolism and animal mythology. According to the Ars Goetia, Bael manifests with 3 heads, one of a toad, one of a man, and one of a cat. This very specific and disturbing image has been the subject of multiple symbolic interpretations. The toad has been associated since ancient times with fertility, poison, and metamorphosis. In medieval alchemy, it represented prima materia, the formless substance from which spiritual and material transformations could emerge. As the head on Bael's body, the toad could symbolize his control over the primordial forces of nature, including the dark and corruptible processes of the material world. Not surprisingly, it was believed that some alchemists could communicate with entities like Bael to obtain revelations about the art of transmuting metals and the secret of eternal life. The human head, on the other hand, represents intellect, consciousness, and language. When found alongside animal heads, it suggests that Bael governs not only the instinctive or visceral, but also the rational and articulate. This distinguishes him from other demonic figures depicted solely as wild beasts or grotesque monsters. The human head on Bael is a symbol of his ability to reason, negotiate, and teach. In many texts he is described as a demon who grants wisdom and hidden knowledge, which is expressed visually through this anthropomorphic characteristic. The integration of the human and the animal turns Bael into a liminal creature, located between 2 worlds, that of civilization and that of the wild, revealed knowledge and forbidden knowledge. The third head, that of the cat, adds a layer of symbolism linked to mystery, intuition, and the power of the night. The cat has historically been an animal associated with the feminine, the occult, and magic. In many cultures, it was both venerated and feared, and during the Middle Ages, especially during witch hunts, it was considered a familiar of witches and a messenger of the devil. In the figure of Bael, the cat's head indicates his affinity with the night, with the occult, and with intuitive forces that escape linear logic. Thus, he is represented as a master of both reason and instinct, and his tripartite form embodies a triad that can be interpreted as body-mind-spirit, or nature-rationality-intuition. The cult and modern esoteric practice related to Bael. Although the figure of Bael has its roots in medieval and Renaissance grimoires, his influence and presence have not been limited to the past. Today, there are numerous esoteric circles, occult orders, and solitary practitioners who recognize Bael as an active entity, capable of being invoked and worked with ritually in a contemporary context. This persistence is due, in part, to the revitalization of ceremonial demonology during the 19th and 20th centuries, but also to the growing popularity of postmodern occultism, which blends elements from diverse traditions to construct personalized systems of magical beliefs and practices. In this context, Bael is not simply a literary relic or symbolic figure, but a spiritual potency that responds to specific callings, provided the proper techniques are followed. One of the primary sources for these modern practices remains the Lemegeton Clavicula Salomonis, and particularly its first part, the Ars Goetia. This text has been republished, commented on, and reinterpreted countless times, both in academic circles and within magical communities. The instructions contained in the Ars Goetia for the invocation of Bael have been modernized in some cases, adapting the requirements to current conditions. For example, the use of animal blood or silver tools has been replaced by symbolic representations, guided visualizations, or ritual materials consecrated by other means. However, the central principle remains. The magician must work from within a protective circle, cast the seal of Bael, pronounce his name with authority, and offer him a definite mission or purpose. In modern ceremonial magic, derived from both the Goetic tradition and the Golden Dawn, the act of invoking Bael involves meticulous preparation. First, a purification of both the space and the practitioner is performed. This may include fasting, ritual baths, the use of perfumes such as frankincense or myrrh, and the recitation of psalms or invocations in Latin, Hebrew, or Enochian. The seal of Bael must be present, either physically engraved on a consecrated tablet or accurately visualized mentally. Many contemporary practitioners claim that visualization is as effective as physical representation, provided it is performed with sufficient concentration. It is suggested that the practitioner be in an altered state of consciousness, induced by meditation, hyperventilation, or even auditory trance through monotonous chanting. Once the space is prepared, the invocation begins. Bael's name is spoken with authority, accompanied by honorific titles that reinforce his power, such as Great King of the East or Ruler of the Unseen. In many modern practices, the formula Bael, appear in your true form, without deception or illusion, before your sacred servant, or other variations derived from ancient texts, are employed. Symbolic and psychological interpretation of Bael in the esoteric and philosophical tradition. Beyond its literal presentation in Grimoires, the figure of Bael possesses a symbolic richness that has been the subject of multiple interpretations from various disciplines, including esoteric philosophy, archetypal psychology, magical semiotics, and the comparative study of religions. In this sense, his representation as a demonic king who appears in the form of a cat, a toad, and a human is not simply an aesthetic characteristic, but a set of symbols that condense profound meanings about the nature of power, invisibility, and dominion over the hidden forces of reality. Understanding Bael from this symbolic perspective allows us to connect his image with universal aspects of the human soul, especially those related to will, ego, shadow, and the desire for transcendence. Let's begin with his zoomorphic triad. The cat is traditionally associated with intuition, secrecy, independence, and the hidden feminine. In many cultures, cats are guardians of the invisible, which fits perfectly with Bael's ability to confer invisibility. In the Egyptian context, the cat was sacred to Batet, goddess of protection and secrets, suggesting that this aspect of Bael can be linked to the control of the environment through perception and detachment. The toad, on the other hand, is an ambivalent symbol. Associated with moisture, earth, and transformation, it refers to the life cycle, to that which emerges from the dark and rotten to take new form. The toad can be interpreted here as a metaphor for the mutation of the soul, which works with the lower to reach the higher. Finally, the figure of man completes this triad, representing rational consciousness, deliberate power, and the ability to exercise dominion through word and gesture. This fusion symbolizes that Bael is a complete spirit, operating on all three levels: instinctive, cat; elemental, toad; and rational, man. From the perspective of analytical psychology developed by Carl Gustav Jung, Bael can be interpreted as an archetypal manifestation of the shadow, the set of impulses, desires, and characteristics repressed by the conscious self. Jung argues that contact with the shadow should not be avoided, but rather consciously integrated to achieve full individuation. In this sense, working with the figure of Bael in esoteric practice represents a direct confrontation with impulses for power, domination, the desire to go unnoticed, or to manipulate one's environment. It is no coincidence that many of the traditional purposes of invoking Bael, such as gaining influence over others or invisibility, correspond to desires that are socially considered questionable, or even unacceptable.